Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast. I'm your fill-in host today, Adam Stellman. With me today is going to be Mitch from the 12 Talk podcast from across the pond. Welcome. We're coming
Thank you.
off one of the better offensive games that we've had this year. Certainly the best, the first mistake-free game we've seen in several weeks from this team. But Mitch, let's talk Seahawks.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I hope Robbie's better soon. I'm always happy to come and swap in and rotate. Nice and early here in the UK. Thanks for that.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, UK. A game I very much enjoyed. A very Seahawks game, you have to say, with a last minute drive. We got very used to seeing Russell Wilson run these last final clutch sort of drives, but Geno has proven multiple times this year and in the past that he's capable, and did it again here.
I actually think I read a stat where Geno has more fourth quarter game-winning drives in the last two seasons than any other quarterback. So, I mean, we can talk about some of the struggles, but when it counts, when it's been needed, I think he's shown out. So,
probably a factor that frustrates the fan base more than anything is the fact that there's these lapses or apparent lapses of concentration or sort of inconsistencies with his decision making until it really matters, and then he just goes and wins the game, and you think, why can't you just put it together for 4 quarters, please?
Well, it's what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks, especially. Is it looks like 2-minute offenses are our bread and butter. Why don't we just stay in the 2-minute offense? Because apparently we can just drive the ball down the field at will as long as we're in the 2-minute offense. That was we did that during the Brown game. We didn't obviously do that during the Ravens game, but we did it again here in the Watch game where we're in 2-minute offense, and apparently we can just get as many yards as we need.
Just get it done.
Yeah. So it was an interesting game. I think. Obviously coming away with a W is always a good thing. There are still a lot of, I think, still a lot of questions about what this team is going to look like going forward. I mean, we're getting into the meat of our season. We've got our second game against the Rams coming up this next week, and we're going to see the 49ers, the Eagles, 49ers again, 49ers, Eagles, Cowboys, 49ers again. It's kind of a murderer's row right there over the next several weeks. So, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not this team is really turned a corner on offense, or if this is just another one of those roller coaster rides we've been taking all season, where we kind of see the defense step up when the offense is slacking, and the offense step up when the defense is slacking. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think you look at those 4 games that we've got coming up, and I really, really don't want to overlook the Rams, because I feel like we did that game.
I don't think we can. I don't think we can afford to overlook the Rams a second time in the season. So
I think the fixtures behind that kind of draw your eyes to them, though, and then you kind of there's a real risk of overlooking that game. But I'm certainly not taking my eyes off the Rams game. I think
and that's going to be an interesting test for this coaching staff, right? Because we do have the 49ers then coming up on a short week. That the following Thursday. So we've got two in the division opponents that we've got to get ready for on a pretty short turnaround. And obviously, the one is at least ostensibly the better team, but the Rams really kind of gave it to us the first time we saw them this season, and it's been a consistent thing. Sean McVay has kind of been Pete Carroll's bugaboo since he came into the division. It kind of seems he's got Carroll's number. So playing the Rams next week, and then having to go up against the 49ers on a shortened week for that Thursday night game is going to be an interesting test for this coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think if you think back to what that Rams game really looked like, we had Stafford picking on us over the middle late in that he was allowed to have plays develop long enough to get someone into the open space across the middle, right? And if you think about everything we've done fairly well and consistently since, Jamal Adams and Witherspoon have been in there, there's not much space anywhere across the defense. You really do have to work hard to create that space. Teams that have had joy against us recently have set up screens really well, and they've schemed around that, but it's not a freebie over the middle anymore. And teams are getting less time for things to develop because the pass rush has been really consistent with pressure. So there's 2 things added there that
it's amazing how that all works together, huh?
Well, yeah, quite. Yeah. But I think that's better.
Well,
So I don't think the same game plan would work again, is what I'm trying to get at there.
yeah, and let's hope Sean McVay makes the first big blunder of his coaching career and just assumes that this is the same old Seahawks team he's going up against. I don't foresee that happening. Sean McVay is a pretty
No.
smart guy. I'm sure he's going
Yeah.
to have a game plan for these new pieces. I mean, obviously, Devin Witherspoon didn't play week one. Jamal Adams wasn't there as well. So yeah, definitely a different looking team. Plus, obviously with Leonard Williams coming in, that's a whole other factor on the defensive line. So every week we do our 5 keys of success. Me and Robbie, we kind of go over what we think the Seahawks need to do in order to come away with a W in the upcoming game. We did that again last week for the Commanders game. And I'm gonna just for those of you that either have or even if you haven't seen that last week's podcast, me and Robbie really kind of dumbed this down. And Robbie kind of got a few shots in early and often because he was pretty frustrated. I've never seen Rob kind of get that way. That was probably the most passionate I've seen that man since his wedding day. I'm sorry he's not here to react to this. Honestly, down with a little bit of a stomach bug. But let's go over those 5 keys. The first one we had was get back to basics. Now this was obviously something that was kind of parroted by not only the coaching staff and Pete Carroll, but some of the players coming out of that Ravens game. DK Metcalf being the guy that I'm quoting right here is that this team needs to get back to basics. And I mean, I think that's true. We had kind of gone away from what this team did really well last season on offense, which was multiple tight end sets, different angles in the running game, and continue to pound the ball until we had that breakaway game or breakaway moment by Kenneth Walker, because he is a big play waiting to happen. Now, obviously, we've got a few other moving pieces on this offense this year with JSN coming in and obviously adding Zach Charbonnet. But I think if you just want to go back and watch, especially the second half of this game, where we were consistently getting those chunk yards in the run game, mostly thanks to Zach Charbonnet just putting his head down and knocking guys over and picking up those extra yards. But this team did look like, I mean, yes, the offense looked a little bit simplistic at times, but it was effective. And I think that's something that hopefully a trend we continue to see. I'm going to give them a pass on this. I think we did get back to basics. I would like to see a little bit more bigger shots downfield moving forward now that we've kind of established that ground game again. But it looks like we're trending in the right direction. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one for me because when you say get back to basics on offense, as a Seahawks fan, you immediately just go, okay, well, 60% of snaps would be run. And everything else, the big plays, the big chunks will come off the back of teams having to try their best to stop the running back talent that we've got. But I actually think they went about this in a different way, and they went back to basics in terms of trying to get teams to scheme to stop, sort of in it. With sort of shallower defensive looks rather than high safeties and things, right? And I think the biggest way we achieved that, especially in the first half, was by throwing a lot of throws sort of underneath coverage. We saw so many throws to JSN in particular in the first half, and allowed him to. It's almost like they said, okay, well, it doesn't matter if we get 3 or 4 yards on first down with a running play, or 3 or 4 yards with a throw underneath to JSN. But the thing is, with the running back room that we've got, and with JSN, if you get the ball in their hands and just hope for 3 or 4 yards, there's real playmaking potential with the ball in their hands and the field in front of them, that occasionally JSN will snap off 20 yards, or Ken Walker will take it to the house. So I think in a way the back to basics, my mind would take me to just lean on the run game and set up shorter third down situations and things.
And they kind of did it in reverse this.
They did it in reverse, and they said, okay, well, you have to react in the same way to stop the running game as you do connecting with the slot underneath. You'll still have to bring safeties up to allow us less yards after the catch. And as soon as we came out in the second half, after establishing that, one of the first throws was a deep ball to DK that didn't quite drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
So I think. But I think that was the plan, to get them to have to react to the running game and to the shots underneath, to open up the field for the intermediates and stuff, which we know the Washington Commanders scheme doesn't sort of fare up to too well. So I feel like we did try to do that kind of, but it's very Seahawky, isn't it, to say we need to get them to stop the run game and then just not use the run game to do the same effect. It's It's kind of
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the not to we tend to call out Shane Waldron quite a bit on this podcast, and I think for good reason for the most part. But again, it does kind of seem like there's still those moments of hesitation when we make those adjustments in game where when we've got these scripted plays, the offense seems to work pretty well, and then we kind of go away from that, and then now we got to call plays in time and kind of react to what the defense is giving us, and that's kind of been where we fall a little bit short. I think we did a
Yeah,
lot better of that this game, but I mean part of that again was how well we were getting those smaller plays going
yeah,
in the first half. Several plays for just 3 and 4, 5 yards, opening up those longer shots. Now we didn't see a really big deep shot play this game, and whether there wasn't any great DK down the sideline or any Tyler Lockett
yeah,
over the middle, getting those beautiful over the shoulder catches. But I think that was what the scheme was meant to be. That's
yeah.
what they were trying to get done in that second half. And I think even though we didn't see it come to fruition this game, I want to see them still kind of stick with that plan because I do think those plays will come.
Well, interestingly, I mentioned this on the We Talk Seahawks podcast this week when we've gone over the game, that it felt like there was like a 1-2-3 punch combination of sort of play there. Like the big shot would have been the haymaker at the end of that punching combination, but the 1-2 was a short run and then a throw underneath. But I think because how many times did we see Charbonnet on first down just rip off 12 yards and just get the first down? It was like, okay, well, we'll try and get 3 yards. Oh, we got a first down. Okay, we do it again. We'd throw the ball underneath and try and get 3 or 4 yards. JSN's taking it for 14. We got another first down. It was almost like the jab and the cross was so effective that the haymaker uppercut never needed to come.
It
It
was
was
it was
like
never needed.
it kind of just we kind of maybe surprised ourselves with the setup working better than the thing we were trying to sort of lure them into, the trap. We never needed the trap. Do you know what I mean? It
It's a
felt
good
like that.
problem to have. Let's hope that that's actually something we can rely. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't want them to rely on it, but if we can have that problem going forward, great. That means that eventually there are going to be those giant chunk plays down the field for guys like DK and Tyler Lockett. And then again, later in the game, the chances of seeing a giant canine run are that much more likely with us
yeah,
being able to get them to bite on those early downs.
for
So
sure.
yeah, like I said, I give them a pass for this. I think we did get back to basics pretty well.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe not uh, like I said, it didn't work out to perfection, but I think we're on the right path, and hopefully this is a trend we see with the offense moving forward. The second one actually just kind of along those same lines, and this one's even more basic, is just put points on the board. And I think this kind of came out of the fact that we tended to, especially when we got down in games, to try and push a little bit farther when we had an opportunity to either take a long field goal or just to try and take 3 points when we're in the red zone. Um, and instead of trying to push it and try and get those 6 points on the board, let's just take what the defense is giving us. Luckily, we've now seen that Jason Myers is that guy and is capable of giving us those points pretty much on automatic when we need them. And I think that was a big reason why we came away with the W this game, because we just took points that were there rather than trying to push it. And good on Jason, because the man has looked automatic, I think, pretty much since week 3 of this season.
Yeah, I think it was week. He's 100% since week 4, but I think
Okay.
he missed one kick. I think missed one kick in week 3. So technically, what we now week 10. So in six and a half weeks of NFL action, he's missed the one kick. That's as good as anybody in the league.
Right.
And I I have consummate faith in Myers. And actually, I think when you look through our squad and you look for actual blue chip talent, as in top 3% at the position, I think we actually only have 2 players. We only have 2 players that you could consider blue chip players, and they are both kickers on our special teams unit. To be honest, I mean Dixon and
Which,
Myers are undoubtedly top 3 players at their position.
yeah, I mean, I'd argue that Dixon's top 1 at his position.
Yeah,
The
could
man is just
easily make
insane.
that case.
But I'm getting on board with Myers. I had a hard time with him at the beginning of the season. I was one of those guys that was a Jason Myers odd year truther. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop this entire season. As soon as he started missing kicks, I was there with everybody else, just going, see, it's a thing. So thank you, Jason Myers, for proving me wrong, for proving everybody wrong, and showing that you do deserve that big contract. I especially when we get later into this season, when we're going to be playing some colder games, we're playing some outdoor games in Seattle. Um, you need to be on point with the kicking game. You need to be able to get those 3 points and those extra points when you can. So yeah, I mean this gives me a lot of hope for the rest of the season, because if we can just know that we can always get 3 points if we need it, that's going to take a ton of pressure off this offense. I think we did obviously would have been nice to see more touchdowns early on in this game, yes, but taking those 3 field goals early in the game are the reason that we ended up coming out with a W. I absolutely believe that if we tried to push it, I don't think we would have been able to score on some of those, or at least not all of them, and maybe would have not come away with a W. So I think we've got to pass on this one. We definitely put points on the board, especially when needed.
Yeah, I think in a game where the Commanders' first kick of the game was missed, they doinked the post on the first PAT, didn't they? So, in a game where they missed their first one and we didn't miss a single one, a narrow victory in the last minute kind of means that I look at that and I can't say anything other than that's a pass, and I think it was really key. So
yeah, absolutely. Our third one, which again kind of continue this trend on offense, only because, and not that the defense hasn't had their woes, and we'll be getting there eventually. But the big thing for me on offense, and the thing that we haven't seen a ton until this year, was giving the ball away. I mean, ball security was a huge issue for this team for the first, I'm going to say the first 9 weeks of the season, because I think we've only had 2 games this year where we haven't given the ball away once, and both those games are victories. So this obviously, I mean, this is another duh. Yeah, if you give the ball away to the opponent, give them more opportunities to score, chances are you're going to lose. And obviously, not giving the ball away once this game proved to be pretty key, because as close as this game was, all it would have taken was one turnover where they could have gotten into scoring position for this to be a completely different outcome.
yeah, no, I completely agree. I think one of the biggest glaring problems with Geno this year has been the sheer amount of interceptions. They are a real problem. Well, they had been a real problem in previous games. I don't want to say they are a real problem going forward, because hopefully he's turned the tide a little bit on that and he tidies that up. They're obviously still going to happen. It's just the frequency of them against the amount of touchdowns thrown, especially in the red zone, was a stark kind of obvious thing that needed to be fixed. I think it played a big part in this game. The amount of yards he threw this year got him nominated for Air Player of the Week, I think.
What was it, 342 yards, 340 something yards?
It was a lot. Although ironically, not they weren't particularly through the air, because a lot of it was yards after catch. But yeah, there was a lot of yak in there.
369 yards was what he came away with. So
369 and 258 yards of yak, which was the second highest in the league this year by a team, and a Seahawks record. And another Seahawks record was 50 yards of yak to 4 different receivers. Walker, Lockett, DK, and JSN all had at least 50 yards of yak, which is not a very Seahawky thing at all.
Certainly hasn't been.
No, and it certainly adds into the point we made on one of the previous points about throwing the ball underneath, accepting that you'll get 3 or 4 yards, and there being just huge upside with playmakers with the ball in hand, with the field in front of them, and letting them use their talents to get keep you away from third down scenarios. So a lot of Geno's yardage was those yak yards, but he still has to get the ball out of hands quickly, hit the numbers so they're not reaching, or as soon as you make someone dive for a ball or lead them into contact, there's no yak. So he threw the ball really well in that respect for that.
Yeah, look, I mean, yak is a very important thing with any offense. I mean, we can talk about Tom Brady. I mean, it was the guys that were able to get yards after the catch, which is the reason why Tom Brady has so many Super Bowl rings. I mean, whether you're talking about Julian Edelman or Wes Welker back in the day, Randy Moss, who, although he was usually just like a guy that would catch it on the deep fly, or Gronk. I mean, look, you can have the strongest arm in the world, but if your player doesn't get to go any further than you can pass the ball, it's going to be very hard to continue going down the field. For sure. Yeah, again, I think that this, we go back and I think that was what's been really frustrating about this offense, especially through the last several weeks, because you go back and look at the season. Yeah, we can talk about week 1 in the Rams game and how nobody looked like they were playing that game, but weeks 2, 3, and 4, I mean, we put up we averaged over 30 points through the first 4 weeks of the season, and we haven't seen that explosive offense since then. And I think, knowing the kind of talent that we have on this team, whether we're talking about just Tyler and DK or K9, or we're talking about all the guys you brought in this season. Or, I mean, let's not forget the tight ends. I mean, Noah Fant has had his games where he has been a yak monster. So it's been really frustrating not seeing this offense be able to pick up those extra yards when they're there. It was really encouraging this game, especially late in the game when the offense really started to shine, which is good because we kind of needed to. The defense had a few woes as the game wore on, which has been a consistent thing. I think part of that might be we have a 33-year-old linebacker playing 100% of the snaps, not taking anything away from Bobby. He's been amazing this season, but I'm trying to figure out why we signed Devin Bush for as much as we did. So let's turn to the defense now. So our fourth key to success was how well, and yes, the pun was intended. How well can we get after the QB? I know you've got a couple of stats you want to throw in. I'm just going to say from the eye test, this looked like we were able to generate more pass rush than we have the last 3 weeks combined. I don't know that the pressure rate was up that high, but you look at Boye Mafe setting a Seahawks franchise record with 7 consecutive games with a sack. You see how well Leonard Williams has been able to translate it when he's come into this defense. I think he got his first sack as a Seahawk this week as well. And then moving Draymond Jones to the outside and moving him to that other outside linebacker position, and kind of seeing how he can hold his own and still generate pressure when he's going up against an offensive tackle has been pretty encouraging.
Yeah, so I mean, this game was our second highest total of pressures after the Giants game, where we obviously came away with 11 sacks. Not as many sacks in this game, but we threatened it the whole game, and pressure rate was superb. Darrell Taylor and Boye Mafe both had 5 pressures each in the game. And that was equal to, I think it was something like 16 pressures in the game. So they basically had a third each. They had the sort of lion's share there of pressures. And I think a big part of those two having the lion's share of those was that we started to put Draymond Jones as a big end on the right hand side of that line in just to reinforce the run instead of Nwosu. So you're seeing Darrell Taylor put in less less run stuffing sort of scenarios, and you've got a guy in there who is going to pass rush less than Taylor, but really secure that side and flush the play towards Williams and Mafe. And DT put on the field in more pass rushing scenarios. That leads to his pressures. The play getting flushed out towards Mafe, and Mafe being as tricky as he is on that side, he's then getting those pressures there. So I think we schemed well to create pressure. Lots of dropbacks for Howell, and so I think we certainly did a better job. It's a pass for me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question that we should give them a passing grade for that this week. I do think it's really interesting. We're kind of seeing the Seahawks go back to something that we've seen before, right? I mean, you look at like the 2010 when Pete Carroll came here, 2010, 11, 12, 13, and even into the Super Bowl years. That was something that we did really well. Was we had this kind of odd looking front where we had it was Red Bryant, or I think we eventually had Michael Bennett that kind of took over that part. He's obviously a different style player, but you have this bigger person that can play inside. You have them playing on the outside to make sure that the run, any running plays kind of get pushed into a certain direction and opening up those lanes for your pass rushers. Obviously, when we had guys like Cliff Averill back in the day or Michael Bennett, and being able to rotate those guys in because you've got these big bodies that could be stopping the run on those early downs. It's an interesting kind of switch. Obviously, the 3-4 front is a completely different look. But again, having that bigger guy on the outside, so you're kind of like making sure that they're funneling plays into your playmakers, I think is brilliant. I hope to see more of it going forward. Obviously, Pete Carroll said that's the plan, so I'm hoping that that's what we'll see this next week in the Rams game.
Yeah, it's an you've mentioned the 3-4 front there. I'm a fan of the 3-4 as a concept. As it opens up many different looks from it. I don't ever want to see the Seahawks play sort of exclusively out of it, because I think it's fairly easily combated in some ways. But when you use it as a framework, everything you can do off it becomes very good to watch. And I'll give you another little stat here. This is a stat from, I think it was from week 5. So I think it was from the first... No, week 6, because we had the bye on week 5, didn't we? I think to be week 6. But through our first 5 games in the first 6 weeks, we averaged 1.9 linemen on the field on defensive snaps. So we call it a 3-man front, but actually there's 2 in there, and on average there's 2. And guess what? There's 2 outside linebackers playing the edge. So essentially it's still a 4-3 or a 4-2 with extra DBs. So it's pretty loose, and they do experiment with it a lot.
Which may be good. I mean, again, you go back. I mean, and we've said this before, and I think you've echoed it too. But I mean, I think defensively, this may be the most talented, at least on
Yeah.
paper, defense that the Seahawks have ever put on the field, at least under the Pete Carroll regime.
Yeah, I agree with that take.
With so many guys that you can move around, whether we're talking Jamal Adams, who obviously can come up and play in the box as a linebacker, or can play that deep safety role still too. You've got guys now like Devin Witherspoon that we can have on the outside, move in inside on those nickel plays, or to just kind of follow if they decide to put their best receiver in the slot, they go ahead and throw Devin Witherspoon over there. You've got Julian Love. There's this defense has so many moving parts that you can put so many different guys in different alignments. I like to see that Clint Hurtt is taking advantage of that and teaming it up really well. Now, obviously, we're going to get to one point where I think we're both going to have a failing grade for the Seahawks in just a sec. But I do think that Clint Hurtt deserves props for taking all these moving pieces, because there are at least 14 or 15 guys that are all starters on any team in this league that play for the Seahawks right now, and you've got to figure out where to put those guys in the best position. And I think that Clint Hurtt, as a second-year defensive coordinator, has done a pretty darn good job thus far.
Yeah, and I'll raise a little nugget here. Something that came out yesterday was that oh gosh, I've forgotten his name. Kobe
Bryant.
Kobe Bryant, thank you. How can I forget that name after
no, it's very
after the basketball connection as well? Yeah, so Kobe Bryant's been fit to return off injured reserve at least last week, but potentially the week prior as well. And when you think about the role that we started putting him in very early in the season and in preseason, sort of a box safety role, nickel role, you look at a really versatile defender there, and you'd think, well, if he's fit, you'd want him back in the team because that versatility is invaluable. But in reality, the guy that he's competing for snaps with is probably the most versatile set of safeties and corners in the league. So he's kind of unfortunate. Whereas on any other roster, Kobe Bryant would have been an immediate elevation because you want him on the 53 because he can cover multiple spots. In reality, all of our defenders can cover multiple spots, and what he provides isn't unique to our roster. So it's almost like someone could get injured in our next game in any one of those positions, and he will cover it no matter which one of those positions it is. What an absolute luxury that is.
It is, and I'm a little sad about it too, because I loved Kobe Bryant going to the draft. He was my guy for that year. I wanted the Seahawks to take him every round that came up after the first round. I was like, get Kobe, get Kobe, get Kobe. They ended up obviously taking him in the 4th round. I was ecstatic, jumping out of the seats. They, of course, then Robbie got his due when they went back and took a corner in the 5th. And props to Tariq Woolen. He has looked like the at least more dynamic player through his first 2 years. But as far as versatility goes, I think Kobe Bryant's got it. Unfortunately, this is a team full of versatile players, and he's going to have a hard time seeing the field. I do hope that we get to see him on the field. I think he's going to be playing this. I do think he's going to get elevated, or at least on the roster for the Rams game. I think he's probably going to be key on special teams a few times. I'm sure we're going to see him make a play because the man is a playmaker. Getting back to what we're talking about, and that's the defense. The defense, we've been giving them some pretty good props lately, and I think for the most part, this team did it really well. But there's been one thing that I think goes back to last season, where we were having really a struggle, and that we eventually found a way to kind of fix it, or at least make it less of an issue. And it's rearing its head again now here midway through the season, and that's we can't seem to tackle guys. And that's a funny thing for the Seahawks, because that's got the Seahawks tackle technique has always kind of been on point under Pete Carroll. And these last couple of years, it has looked off for some reason. And even though this wasn't anywhere near as bad as it looked like the second half of the Rams game, we had some guys slipping arm tackles up and down the field. And we cannot continue to do that and hope to pull out close wins. So this is still an issue. I'm going to give us a fail on this because it just looked like there were a couple times when some of those players even some of our bigger name players, whether it be Jordan Brooks or Bobby Wagner or Jamal Adams, just kind of turnstiles there
Yeah.
in the wrap up game. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's a failing grade for me as well. And I think when you look at the amount of yards that both offenses put up and the amount of points put on the board, it kind of just points exactly at that point. Because if you think that, I think it was 150 yards less of offense for the Commanders, but we still needed a last second
last second field
field
goal.
goal to grab it. It either points to us not seeing our drives all the way through to points, or a team being allowed to snap off big plays. I mean, if you look at the Commanders, it was either 3 and outs or a big broken coverage, or big broken play where we missed tackles, allowing them to get in. And 157 yards for Robinson kind of also points to that. So there's a huge amount of stats on their offense that point at this being a problem. It's honestly very frustrating. I think it was 14 broken tackles in this game, which again takes us to something like 30 in 2 games, which is far more than.
I think we had 17 in the Ravens game. So yeah, 31 missed tackles over 2 weeks. That's
insane compared to the rest of the season as well, because it's not
yeah.
been as much of a problem in any of the games. So yeah, certainly a problem, certainly a failing grade. One of the biggest things we have to sort going forward. That's one worry for me going forward, that if we don't fix that, we're going to keep letting teams stay in games. And that's essentially what it was, right? We allowed the Commanders to stay close
Stick
to
around,
us
yeah.
until the end of the game, and they snapped off a touchdown at the end, which had me honestly raging. the timing of it, and the fact that we just seemed to have no resistance to it, it was very frustrating.
Yeah, the defense the last defensive drive was a pretty ugly one.
Yes.
I think on par with some of the drives that we had against the Ravens game, and that's something we're gonna have to work on. I do think if the offense can continue to cook, not to use that term because I hate it, but even though I love cooking, and continue to dominate, not dominate, but at least keep that time of possession close. This I think was one of the first. Again, I think we've only had 2 games where we have won the time of possession game, and this was one of them. And it wasn't by much. I think it was like 30 minutes and something seconds to 29 minutes and something seconds.
Yeah, it was close.
But you allowing your defense the time it needs to rest and recoup and get to before they go back out on the field, I think is going to be really key this second half. Which kind of actually brings us to our next point. We usually try and find a couple of things to talk about at the end of the podcast. And you and me had a little discussion beforehand about 2 things that we think are really important moving forward with the Seahawks. And the biggest one I think we talked about on offense was just the chemistry and connection moving forward, because that looked like an issue early in the season, especially with one of our star players, DK Metcalf and Geno Smith. They just didn't seem to be on the same page. I think the same thing could be said for Geno and JSN at the beginning of the season, although that might be more just lack of familiarity. But this game, especially in the second half, it looked like everybody on offense was on the same page. We were really chugging along. We were able to build off those nice runs that we were getting from Zach Charbonnet in the second half, and able to well, just move the ball pretty much with ease going into that second half. And I think that's something we haven't seen a lot of this season. So I think that moving forward, chemistry on offense is going to be something to really watch out for, because I think it finally looked like we had a cohesive unit this game, something I don't think we've seen a lot of this season.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, this one, because I feel like the inaccuracy, or call it lack of connection, just because I'm not convinced it's all Geno. I think some of it could be DK as well. It could be a combination. So I don't want to say it's just execution from Geno. But with, you mentioned JSN, actually, I wasn't sort of thinking that you were going to mention that, but actually it really ties into this point I'm going to make. Early in the season, we saw an interception thrown JSN's direction where he was on an out route towards the touchline. Geno thought it was going to come back, I think, so he threw it low and behind him. I think he was going to come back in a Tyler Lockett, like we saw Tyler Lockett do for the touchdown actually this week. Come back, catch it low, put it in a position where only he can grab it, only he knows it's going to happen. You know, defender can't defend it, right? That's Tyler Lockett and what he's done all his career. And Geno's super super highly tuned with Tyler on those.
Yeah.
It's almost like he was expecting that from Geno. Sorry, he was expecting that from JSN, and there's also been some moments to DK where they've just seemed to be on the wrong wavelength. But the thing that's consistent about it is it's when Geno's waiting for that route to fully mature until right at the last second of that route, where there is something to come back to make his life easier to connect it, and they're on a different playbook page,
right,
with what's supposed to happen there. JSM was supposed to come back maybe, or maybe he wasn't, and Geno didn't know that he wasn't, or it seems to be when Geno gets time in the pocket to let the route mature all the way to the end. Everyone's expecting something different to be drawn up. So I don't know whether I don't know who that lies with, but it seems to be that connection that's so good with Tyler is exactly what's missing on those plays with those guys. But when you get the ball into JSN's hands early and give him the field in front of him to unlock and rip off yards, he's been very good. DK did it a lot in that game. Ball in his hands, allow him to use that physical advantage to try and get some more. We saw it massively on the last drive that we won the game. DK did that. So those scenarios working for both Geno, DK, and JSN, not working very well when routes are fully matured. That's the sort of bit.
Well, I think that's part of that West Coast offense, right? I mean, it's supposed to be about timing plays. You're not waiting for the route to finish developing before you launch the ball. You know where it's going to be, and you let the ball go, and that's when the receivers, are going to be, that's where they'll be at the time the ball reaches them. You're right. That's kind of seemed to be a little bit off at the early start of the season, and I think this game it looked like, at least for 30 minutes, looked like we had fixed those issues. Because again, at the first half, I think we still saw some of those disconnects. There were definitely more missed throws in the first half than there were the second half. And just going back to DK, look, someone with that size, that length, and that speed, if they build up ahead of steam, they're going to be hard to stop. So I don't think we've seen a ton of times where they're giving DK the ball in the open field. A lot of that's just because the way defenses are scheming up, right? I mean, they know that he's the number one target. At least, they think
Supposedly.
he's the number one target on this team. Yeah, I mean, I still think it's Tyler Lockett, but we can talk about what wide receiver one's another time. So they generally have him pretty well bodied up. But if he has some space and he can start moving, once those legs start churning, they're going to be pretty hard to stop. Like I said, I think this game we got to see a little bit better chemistry and connection between the people that you really want on offense, which is going to be your receivers or your skill players and your quarterback. I'm hoping that portends some good plays moving forward. But this is one game, 1 week, and I think we're just kind of leading into the next point that we're going to talk about. There hasn't seemed to be that carryover from week to week. We haven't seen a team be on the same page week in and week out, and that's really what's been missing this first half of the season. I'm hoping that the second half will get there, but I think the thing that we're really waiting on is that complete game. It's been a thing that Pete Carroll's mentioned for several press conferences. I've said it here a few times, but it seems like when the offense is working really well, the defense takes a back seat, and when the defense is working really well, the offense can't get anything going. Yes, that's an issue with any NFL team week in and week out, but the really good teams know how to build off each other's energies and stay focused within the game and put together a complete game. And we just haven't seen that from the Seahawks yet this year.
Yeah, it is a frustration. I can't think of a game where offense and defense has been as good as each other at the same time. As in, the offense marches the ball all the way to the field into the red zone touchdown. Defense comes on 3 and out. Offense back on straight up the field again. Sort of scenario. There's been none of that at the same time. There has been times where, say, for a half, we've put up 21 points in a half. Second half, we come out and we put up just 3 or a single touchdown or something. But the defense has marched out, and in that half has been the sort of irresistible force. They seem to take it in turns. Unfortunately, in some of our worst games this season, the defense has been stellar for 3 quarters, and the offense has done it for maybe the first quarter or the opening drive only, and then we've had field goals. So absolutely the case on that. I would also open it up to the different compartments of both the defense and the offense as well being slightly inconsistent. There have been games where the running game's been superb, but Geno's been a little inaccurate, or on defense the coverage has been superb and we've lapsed in run D, or vice versa. More, I think probably 80% of snaps run D's been great, and coverage has maybe at times wavered a bit. But we haven't put together a complete game in any game this year. This is the Seahawks, and I know that we're never going to be comfortable in a game. It's not what we do. It's never. I mean, I feel like if we did have that complete game with the talent we've got on both sides of the ball, we probably would finally see that. But no,
there was a little bit of that in 2013. I felt like that the Super Bowl
just 10 years ago.
Yeah, I know it's been a while, but I'm gonna look. That's those were the glory days, right? But I do kind of miss those days when the offense would just put up points in bunches when we needed to, and the defense could shut the door on any team that they wanted to. That obviously hasn't been the case this year. I do think that the defense, when everything is working great, they look like a championship defense. I haven't seen the offense look like that. And I wouldn't even say in this game. I mean, yes, the offense played a really good game, no turnovers, which was really, really nice, but it's still we were kind of sluggish as the game started, and it was only later on when we were wearing them down that we were starting to score points. That's fine if that's the strategy, and we won't see touchdowns early, and we'll see them late. I'm okay with that. But on the converse of that, we need to be able to see the defense step up when the offense is going to start making those drives to give them more opportunities to do so. We just haven't seen that connection yet.
No, and that's the good thing, right? I'm going to put a positive twist on this, in that
good, somebody needs to, because it's certainly not going to be me.
Yeah, I mean, the point I'm going to make is that we're 6-3. If we beat the Rams, we're 7-3. If we have our worst case scenario against the 4 really difficult games that we've got coming up, we'd be 7-7 with the Titans, Arizona, the Steelers, and there's another game in there. But either way, you see my point. If we win this one, worst case scenario is
there isn't another game in there. There's only 17.
That was 17. Oh, I didn't back myself for nailing the roster off the top of my head. There you go. I did it. Sorry, the roster, the lineup of
schedule,
games,
the
schedule. Yeah. But yeah, I think we've put ourselves in a position for a playoff run, whether it's one game or more, having not been as intended. We've full of injuries early on, which we seem to, touch wood, we're sort of pulling away from now. But we've still got a competitive record. We're still right in the hunt. We're odds on to make we're overwhelmingly odds on to make the playoffs now with the strength of the NFC.
I think it's 87%. Was the last
despite having the youngest roster, averaging 19 rookies on the roster each game day weekend. I think we're 4th youngest roster and average age 25 this year as well. So yes, we're incomplete. We're not putting it all together. Yes, there's inconsistencies. We're not that Legion of Boom plus
Russell and Marshawn.
Plus Russell and Marshawn. Yeah, we're not that sort of combination of talent and experience. I think that was the key thing. You had a very talented roster there, but there were experienced guys. It's a good blend. We're not quite at that level of experience and talent that we want to be, but we are only a year or so removed from having these incredibly talented rookie classes, more experienced, in cap-friendly sort of situations. Those next 2 years are when I think we'll start seeing really consistent, complete games. Hopefully, if the coaching staff can, get that right, and the play calling can support it. So, yeah, not quite there yet, but I'm very confident that we're going the right direction with the age profile and talent.
Yeah, look, I'm right there with you. I think that even if someone who's visually impaired can see the future's pretty bright for the Seahawks. I mean, we've had 2 back-to-back pretty stellar draft classes. You look at some of the second-year leaps that some of these guys, and Boye Mafe obviously being, I think, the big one, and I think you can put K9 in there as well. But Boye Mafe's had just a giant 1 to 2 year leap, and I think that most of that's just him getting more opportunities in year 2. But yeah, you've already mentioned it. We've had more rookies contributing this season than anyone else. It was very similar story last year. I think we had an average of what, like 12 or 11 or 12 rookies playing each game. This is a young team, which means that there's room to grow. And yeah, as these guys gain more experience, I think the sky's the limit. I mean, look, Devin Witherspoon has proven to be everything you'd want out of a number 5 overall pick. I think that he's only continued to get better as the season has gone on. I think that even though Tariq Woolen hasn't put out the kind of stats that we saw from him last season, he's still holding his side of the field down. I mean, yeah, we're not saying his name, but mainly that's because he hasn't done anything wrong to call him out for. Um, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, we do have a lot of free agents coming up this next season. It's going to be interesting to see who they can bring back. But I do think this team is still continuing in the right direction. I mean, yeah, look, the thing I think most Seahawks fans will say is, in JSN and Pete Carroll, in JSN, in John Schneider and JS, in John Schneider and Pete Carroll, we believe that they haven't really steered us wrong. I mean, we've kind of enjoyed the success that very few franchises in this league enjoy over the last almost 2 decades, or decade and a half, I guess. And yeah, I think moving forward, this is going to be a really exciting season for the next 7 to 8 games. It's going to be hopefully more games than that. The offseason is going to be really exciting, and obviously the draft coming up, I think we're all kind of stoked for. So
Yeah.
to wrap up, give me your final thoughts. What's your big takeaway from this game, and what do you think we're going to be seeing in the coming weeks?
I think it was a step in the right direction with the play calling. I think they schemed up something. I mean, Waldron always schemes up a good game in terms of the scripts and things. It's his adaptation in game that
Right.
we all really question, and I think rightfully so this year. I think he's got a lot to prove there. But I think we drew up a really good game. I think it was quite transparent what we were trying to do. I think we were pleasantly surprised with what we saw out of people on the offense. So I think it's a step in the right direction with sort of getting back to what we can do and really honing in on the skill set we've got with our players. Defense continues to be a top 5 defense in the league, I think, and they're giving us a chance to win any game, which I think is really key coming up. If there's any key factor moving forward here with our up and coming 5 games, it's that the defense are going to give us a chance, and it is going to be up to Geno to do what he can do and show us more of his second half Geno performance in this game rather than what we've seen in prior games. So final thoughts for me are they've shown me really promising stuff, and it's given me some hope for the up and coming games.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well said. I mean, obviously, like I mentioned before, Geno, I believe, is the top of the league with fourth quarter or with game-winning drives since taking over the starting spot for the Seahawks. So being able to have a shot in any game, even if it's in the fourth quarter, seems to be a good spot for us to be in. I think the offense is in good hands. Look, I've had my ups and downs with Geno since he became the starter, even before then when he was just the backup. But I think we've got the right people in place. I think he works best when he's a facilitator. I think we saw that in the second half of this last game. Geno doesn't need to do too much. He just needs to be the guy that we paid him to be when we brought him in, pretty much to hold a clipboard. And that's when you come in, just be efficient, be effective. And I think he's the right guy for that. Obviously, we still got the meat of the season in front of us. It's going to be a pretty interesting second half. But I do think this team is trending in the right direction. Yeah, look, I want to shout out to all those that are giving us a listen, whether you're across the pond in England or you're here in the States or even down in Mexico. I know we've got a few fans south of the border as well. Thank you for listening to the Let's Talk Seahawks podcast, the podcast for fans like you. We will see you guys in the coming weeks. And as always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.